The sound of shattering glass cut through the conference room, but it wasn't the glass that broke that morning. It was a woman's last thread of patience. Park Min-ah stood frozen in the doorway of the 32nd floor conference room at Park Global Investments, her leather messenger bag slipping from her shoulder. She'd been a translator for 6 years. She'd worked with difficult clients before. Arrogant executives, impatient businessmen, people who treated her like a piece of office equipment that spoke multiple languages. But she'd never been humiliated quite like this. The Gangnam skyline stretched behind floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul's wealth on full display. The conference room was designed to intimidate. Black marble table, leather chairs that cost more than Mina's monthly rent, abstract art that screamed expensive taste. 12 people sat around that table. 11 of them were now staring at her with various expressions of discomfort and second-hand embarrassment. The 12th person, James Park, CEO of Park Global Investments, stood at the head of the table with his face flushed red from anger and too much soju the night before. His expensive suit jacket was off, his silk tie loosened, his hair slightly disheveled. At 42 years old, he looked older, stress, and excess aging him poorly. He'd inherited his father's company 5 years ago and had been running it into the ground ever since, though his pride would never let him admit it. "Did you just correct me?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "In front of my investors?" Mina kept her expression neutral, professional. She'd learned that skill early in her career. Never show them when they've gotten under your skin. "Mr. Park, I was simply clarifying the translation. The English phrase you use doesn't mean what you think it means." The investors were confused. That was the truth. The 3 American investors from Morrison Capital had exchanged glances when James had confidently used an English idiom completely incorrectly. Min-ah had smoothly corrected it in her translation, trying to save him from embarrassment. Apparently, he'd noticed. "I don't pay you to think," James said, his voice rising. "I pay you to translate, word for word, exactly as I say it." "Even if what you're saying is wrong?" The words escaped before Mina could stop them. The room went completely silent. Mina had been translating at Park Global for 3 weeks. It was supposed to be a simple contract. Translate during the merger negotiations with Morrison Capital. 6 weeks of work. Good pay. She needed the money. Her mother's medical bills in Busan were piling up. Her younger brother's university tuition was due next month. And her father's debts, even 3 years after his death, still haunted her bank account like ghosts that refused to leave. So she'd swallowed her pride day after day, watching James Park take credit for other people's work, bully his staff, and parade his inherited wealth like he'd earned it. She'd smiled politely when he called her the translation girl, despite her name being on every contract. She'd stayed quiet when he made jokes about her simple job to impress the American investors. But correcting him had been automatic, professional instinct. She was good at her job, brilliant, actually, fluent in Korean, English, Japanese, and conversational Mandarin. She'd studied at Seoul National University, spent 2 years in London. She knew languages the way musicians knew notes, and she couldn't watch someone butcher hers without at least trying to fix it. James Park clearly didn't appreciate the effort. "You're right," he said, walking slowly around the table toward her. "What I'm saying is wrong. Do you know why it's wrong?" He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell the coffee and cigarettes on his breath. "Because I'm standing here trying to close a $60 million deal, and I have to worry about some translator with an attitude problem making me look stupid in front of my investors. I wasn't trying to... You're just a hired mouth." James's voice was loud enough now that people in the hallway probably heard. "I don't need your opinions. I don't need your corrections. I need you to sit in your little chair in the corner and repeat exactly what I say, in whatever language these people speak. That's it. That's your entire job. Do you understand?" Min-ah felt heat rising in her face. Not embarrassment. Anger. Pure, white-hot anger that she forced down with years of practice. I understand perfectly, Mr. Park. Good. He turned back toward the table, dismissing her. Now, sit down and... I understand that you're insecure about your English because you never studied abroad like your father wanted. I understand that you inherited this company instead of building it, and that makes you feel like you have to prove yourself constantly. And I understand that you're so terrified these investors will see through you that you're taking it out on the one person in this room who's actually trying to help you not embarrass yourself. The words came out calm, measured, professional. That somehow made them worse. James Park's face went from red to purple. For a moment, Minna thought he might actually have a stroke. The investors were staring. The Korean executives were frozen. Someone's phone buzzed on the table, absurdly loud in the silence. Get out. James's voice shook. You're fired. Security will escort you out of the building. You'll never work for any company in Gangnam again. I'll make sure of it. Fine. Minna adjusted her messenger bag on her shoulder, maintaining her dignity even as her stomach dropped. She needed this job, needed the money, but she wouldn't beg, wouldn't grovel. She'd learned that from her father. You could lose everything except your self-respect. I'll send an invoice for the 3 weeks I've worked. Professional courtesy. You'll get nothing. James smiled, mean and petty. Sue me if you want. My lawyers cost more per hour than you make in a month. Now get out before I have you thrown out. Minna turned toward the door. 12 people watched her walk away. Not one of them said anything. Not one of them stood up for her. The American investors looked uncomfortable, but stayed silent. They needed this deal more than they needed to defend a translator they just met. The Korean executives kept their eyes down. They worked for James Park and valued their jobs more than justice. She was 3 steps from the door when James called out, "Oh, and Minna?" She paused but didn't turn around. "Pick up those papers you dropped. I'm not paying cleaners to deal with your mess." Minna looked down. In her shock, she'd dropped the folder of documents she'd been carrying. Papers were scattered across the marble floor. Translation notes, meeting agendas, glossaries she'd prepared. 3 weeks of meticulous work. She could keep walking. Should keep walking. Let him keep his petty victory. But that anger, carefully controlled for 6 years of dealing with people like James Park, finally found a crack in her composure. Minna turned around slowly. She looked at James Park standing there with his smug smile, his inherited office, his unearned confidence. Then she looked at the papers on the floor. Then back at him. "No," she said quietly. "Excuse me?" "No, I'm not picking them up." "You want them picked up? You do it yourself. Or maybe one of these executives who are so afraid of you they won't even defend a colleague being humiliated. Or maybe one of the investors who are pretending they don't see what kind of man they're about to give $60 million to." She met his eyes directly. "But not me. I'm done being treated like I'm invisible." James took a step toward her, his face ugly with rage. "You little?" "Careful," Minna interrupted. "There are witnesses, and I'm recording this conversation." She gestured to her phone, visible in her bag's side pocket. "Professional habit. I record all my translation sessions for accuracy. Every word you've said in the last 5 minutes is documented, including the part where you admitted you're planning to blacklist me in the industry." "That's illegal, by the way. Tortious interference with business relations. I may be just a translator, but I know the law." She didn't wait for his response. Minna walked out of that conference room with her head high, leaving the scattered papers on the floor like evidence of a crime scene. The elevator ride down 32 floors felt like falling. Minna's hands shook as she pressed the button for the lobby. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was fading, replaced by cold reality. She'd just lost a major contract. James Park was well connected enough to damage her reputation. She had bills due in 2 weeks and no income to cover them. But underneath the fear, there was something else. Something she hadn't felt in years. Relief. She'd spent 6 years swallowing her pride, accepting disrespect, staying invisible just to survive. And for 3 minutes up in that conference room, she'd been fully, completely visible. She'd stood up for herself. Even if it cost her everything, at least she'd done it. The elevator doors opened to the marble lobby of Park Global Investments. Security was already waiting. James must have called down. 2 guards, both looking uncomfortable with their assignment. "Miss Park," one of them said apologetically, "we need to escort you out of the building." "I'm going," Minna said. "You don't need to escort me. I know where the door is." But they followed her anyway, procedure being procedure. Other employees in the lobby stared. Some looked sympathetic. Most looked away, not wanting to be associated with someone being thrown out. Office politics were brutal like that. Minna walked through the lobby, through the glass doors, out onto the Gangnam Street where autumn sun made everything look deceptively bright and hopeful. The security guards stopped at the entrance, their job complete. She stood on the sidewalk, her messenger bag heavy on her shoulder, and pulled out her phone. 3 missed calls from a number she didn't recognize. She'd check them later. Right now, she needed to call her mother, explain why the money would be late this month. Needed to call her brother, tell him not to count on the tuition payment she'd promised. Minna took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that someone had been listening to every word of that confrontation. Someone who'd been listening to her voice for 2 years, watching over her from a distance she'd never suspected. Someone who was, at that very moment, sitting in a penthouse office across Gangnam with his phone in his hand and murder in his eyes. Because Park Minna wasn't just a translator. She was an asset. She was intelligence. She was the invisible woman who'd been gathering information for one of Seoul's most dangerous men without ever meeting him face to face. And someone had just humiliated her, threatened her livelihood, thrown her away like garbage. James Park thought he was powerful, thought his money and his family name and his business connections made him untouchable. He was about to learn a very painful lesson about actual power. 3 blocks away, in a penthouse office that overlooked all of Gangnam like a kingdom, Kang Jae-hyun set down his phone very carefully. His hand was shaking slightly, not with fear, with rage. Pure, cold rage that he kept locked down tight because letting it loose would be dangerous for everyone in a 5-mile radius. He'd been listening to Minna's translation session the way he always did. She kept her phone recording in her bag during every job, professional habit she'd developed on her own before she ever started working for him. It meant he could monitor her safety, make sure the clients he sent her to weren't dangerous. It also meant he'd heard every word James Park had said, every insult, every threat, every moment of humiliation inflicted on a woman who'd done nothing except her job perfectly. Jae-hyun had been listening to Park Minna's voice for 2 years. Had never met her in person. Their arrangement was strictly remote. She translated documents for his legitimate businesses, attended meetings at companies he was investigating, and reported anything unusual she noticed. In exchange, he paid her extremely well and ensured she got good contracts. It was supposed to be purely professional, strategic. She was brilliant at her job, ethical despite working for a criminal, and observant in ways that made her invaluable. He'd told himself that's all it was. Professional appreciation for a valuable asset. He'd been lying to himself for at least 18 months. Somewhere between listening to her work late into the night and hearing her gentle voice when she called her mother, and noticing how she always helped elderly people struggling with directions, even when she was running late for appointments. Somewhere in there, Kang Jae-hyun had crossed a line he didn't usually cross. He'd started caring about someone who wasn't family, wasn't crew, wasn't part of his world. And now, someone had hurt her. Jae-hyun stood and walked to the window of his office. Seoul spread below him, Gangnam's wealth and power visible in every building, every street, every carefully maintained facade of legitimacy covering the corruption underneath. He'd built his empire by understanding how this city really worked. Not the laws on the books, but the actual rules. Who really had power, where the leverage points were. How to apply pressure until things broke exactly the way he wanted them to. James Park was about to become a lesson in those rules. Jae-hyun pulled out his other phone, the secure one, and made a call. It was answered on the first ring. Find out everything about James Park, CEO of Park Global Investments. I want every business deal, every debt, every secret, every connection. I want to know who he's sleeping with, who he owes money to, and where every dollar in his company actually comes from. How deep do we go? The voice on the other end was professional, efficient. Questions were for clarification, not questioning. All the way. And I want it by tonight. Jae-hyun's voice was cold, controlled, dangerous in its calmness. James Park just made a mistake. He hurt someone under my protection. I'm going to make sure he understands exactly what that costs. He ended the call and made another one immediately. It's me. That translator contract I set up at Park Global? It's compromised. The CEO just fired her, publicly humiliated her in front of investors, threatened to blacklist her in the industry. Pause. No, she's fine physically, but I need you to do 3 things. First, clear her father's remaining debts, all of them. Second, set up consulting contracts with our legitimate businesses. Translation work, enough to replace what she just lost. Third, make sure her mother's medical care in Busan is fully covered. Use the discretionary fund. Another pause as the person on the other end asked a question. Because she's been working for me for 2 years and someone just tried to destroy her for doing her job. Jae-hyun's jaw clenched. And because I don't tolerate people harming my assets. Ever. Asset. He used that word deliberately, clinically, trying to maintain the professional distance that had already eroded completely. He ended that call and stood at the window, watching the city. Somewhere out there, Mina was probably trying to figure out how to survive losing a major contract. Probably worried about her family, probably angry and hurt, and trying very hard not to show it because that's who she was, someone who maintained her dignity, even when people tried to strip it away. She had no idea he existed beyond a voice on the phone and encrypted messages. Had no idea that someone had been watching over her, listening to her, protecting her from a distance for 2 years. Had no idea that the worst day of her professional life was about to become the catalyst for something that would change everything. James Park thought he'd won, thought he'd put an arrogant translator in her place, thought his money and power made him untouchable. He was wrong. Jae-hyun made one more call. This one answered immediately. Start pulling files on Park Global Investments. Every transaction for the last 5 years. I want to know what they're hiding. His voice was soft, controlled, absolutely lethal. And get me a meeting with the Morrison Capital investors. They're about to learn some very interesting things about the man they're planning to give $60 million to. How fast do you need this? Yesterday. Jae-hyun smiled, cold and sharp. James Park threatened to make sure Mina never works in Gangnam again. I'm going to make sure he never works anywhere again. Ever. He ended the call and pulled up Mina's file on his computer. Her photo was professionally taken. She'd needed it for her translation agency profile. Black hair pulled back in a neat bun, thin gold-rimmed glasses, slight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Professional. Competent. Invisible in the way service workers often were. Except, she wasn't invisible to him. Hadn't been for a long time. Jae-hyun had built his empire on control, strategy, and ruthless efficiency. He didn't make emotional decisions, didn't let personal feelings interfere with the business, maintained careful distance from everyone except his inner circle. But as he looked at Mina's photo and remembered the sound of her voice when she'd told James Park, no, that quiet strength, that refusal to be diminished even in the face of losing everything, Jae-hyun made a decision that was absolutely, completely emotional. He was done with distance, done with protection from the shadows, done with pretending she was just an asset. Min-ah had stood up for herself today. Now he was going to stand up for her. And James Park? James Park had just become the example Jae-hyun would use to make sure everyone in Seoul understood a very simple rule. You don't touch what belongs to the Viper of Gangnam. Not ever. The destruction would be systematic, thorough, and absolutely devastating. And it would start tonight. Hello, beautiful viewers and listeners. I hope you're enjoying this story. If yes, please do me a favor and smash that like button right now. It helps us bring you more incredible romances like this one. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our subsequent stories. And lastly, go to the comment section below and tell me where in the world you're watching from. And here's something special. If you'd like your name featured as a character in our next Mafia romance story, drop your name in the comments right now. We read every single one, and you might just become the next hero or heroine. Alright, let's get back to the story. To understand what was about to happen, you need to know three things. Who Park Min-ah really was, how Kang Jae-hyun became the man he was, and what connected them across 2 years of careful distance. Park Min-ah wasn't always a translator working 3 jobs to stay afloat. She wasn't always the woman who swallowed her pride and accepted disrespect just to make rent. There was a time, not so long ago, when she'd had different dreams. Simpler ones, maybe. But her own. 6 years ago, Min-ah had been 22 and graduating from Seoul National University with a degree in English literature. She'd studied abroad in London for 2 years, lived in a tiny flat in Brixton, worked part-time at a bookshop near King's Cross, and fallen completely in love with languages, not just speaking them, but understanding them. The way words carried culture, how translation was less about dictionary definitions and more about capturing meaning across the gap between worlds. Her father had been so proud. Park Dong-min had owned a small printing business in Busan. Nothing fancy, but honest work that paid the bills. He'd insisted on paying for Min-ah's education himself, wouldn't let her take loans. "You're going to do something important," he told her. "Something that matters. I can feel it." Min-ah had believed him. She'd come home from London with plans to start a translation agency, maybe work with international publishers, help bring Korean literature to English audiences and vice versa. She'd been naive, maybe, idealistic, definitely, but happy. Then her father died, a heart attack, sudden and brutal. He was 53 years old and gone before the ambulance arrived. Min-ah had been at a job interview in Seoul when she got the call. By the time she made it to Busan, he was already at the funeral home. The grief was devastating. But grief, Min-ah learned, was a luxury you could only afford if you had financial security. And her father, it turned out, had debts. Significant ones. The printing business had been struggling for years. He'd taken loans to keep it running, to pay for Min-ah's education, to cover her mother's medical expenses when she developed diabetes. He'd smiled through it all, never let on that he was drowning financially. The debts totaled 45 million won. Her father's life insurance barely covered the funeral costs. The printing business was sold to pay creditors, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. At 22, Min-ah had suddenly become responsible for her mother's care, her younger brother's university education, and 15 million won in remaining debt that the creditors very politely but firmly insisted needed to be paid. Her dreams of a translation agency evaporated. Instead, she became a freelance translator taking any job that paid. Corporate contracts, technical manuals, medical documents, legal depositions. She worked 14-hour days, 7 days a week. Lived in a tiny rooftop apartment in Mapo-gu that was hot in summer and freezing in winter. Ate convenience store meals and learned to stretch every one until it screamed. It had been 2 years of that grinding existence when she took a job that changed everything. A pharmaceutical company hired her to translate internal documents from Korean to English for international investors. Standard corporate work, good pay. Mina translated everything meticulously, as she always did. And as she always did, she actually read what she was translating. Most translators didn't bother beyond understanding the surface meaning. Mina couldn't help herself. She was too curious, too thorough. What she read made her sick. The pharmaceutical company was bribing government officials to approve a new diabetes medication. The drug trial results had been falsified, side effects minimized, effectiveness exaggerated. People were going to take this medication believing it was safe. People like her mother, who relied on diabetes medication every single day. Mina had finished the translation job, collected her payment, and then spent 3 sleepless nights staring at her ceiling, wrestling with her conscience. She needed the money, needed every job she could get. Exposing corporate corruption was a luxury she couldn't afford. It wasn't her responsibility. It wasn't her problem. Except it was, because if she stayed silent, people would get hurt. People would die, maybe, and she'd be complicit. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. You're going to do something important, something that matters. Mina had gathered every document she'd translated, every piece of evidence she'd seen, and sent it anonymously to the Korean Ministry of Food and Drug Safety. Then, to 3 major newspapers. Then to a consumer protection advocacy group. She'd used encryption, public Wi-Fi at coffee shops, every precaution she could think of to stay anonymous. Because she knew what happened to whistleblowers. They got sued, blacklisted, destroyed. She couldn't afford to become a target. The scandal broke 2 weeks later. Government investigation, arrests, the pharmaceutical company's executives facing criminal charges. The medication was pulled from development. The company dissolved within 6 months. Mina watched it all unfold on the news, alone in her apartment, terrified someone would trace it back to her. No one did. She'd been careful. What she didn't know was that someone else had been watching that scandal very carefully. Someone who had a vested interest in seeing that particular pharmaceutical company destroyed. Kang Jae-hyun. The pharmaceutical company had been laundering money for the Jade Tiger Syndicate, a rival criminal organization trying to expand into Seoul. Their destruction had been a significant blow to the Jade Tigers, set back their operations by years. Jae-hyun had been planning his own move against them when the corruption scandal hit. Someone had done his work for him. He wanted to know who. It took his people 3 weeks to trace the anonymous tips back to Mina, another week to build a complete profile on her. Translator, struggling financially, father's debts, family obligations, no criminal record, no political affiliations, no apparent agenda beyond basic human decency. She'd destroyed a corrupt company, not for money or revenge, but because it was the right thing to do, even though it put her at risk, even though she gained nothing from it. Jae-hyun found that fascinating. In his world, everyone had an angle. Everyone wanted something. Pure altruism was so rare he'd almost stopped believing it existed. So he'd approached her with an offer. The first contact had been a phone call to her personal number, late at night when she'd been working on a translation project, living room lights dim to save electricity. Park Mina. The voice had been male, calm, controlled. You don't know me, but I know you. I know what you did with the pharmaceutical company documents. I know you were the anonymous source. Mina's blood had gone cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, and you don't need to be afraid. I'm not calling to threaten you. I'm calling to thank you. That company was laundering money for people I consider enemies. Your conscience accidentally did me a significant favor. There had been a long silence. Mina had been calculating. Deny everything? Hang up? Destroy her phone, maybe? I have a proposition for you, the voice continued. You're a brilliant translator. You notice things other people miss. You have access to corporate documents, board meetings, private conversations, and you have integrity, which is somehow both your greatest strength and your most dangerous weakness. Who are you? Someone who can help you. Your father left debts, 15 million won remaining. Your mother needs medical care. Your brother's tuition is due next semester. You're working yourself to death and barely staying afloat. The accuracy of that information had been terrifying. How do you know that? I know everything about you, Mina. Where you live, where you work, what time you call your mother every Sunday evening. I know you eat the same convenience store kimbap for dinner 4 nights a week because it's the cheapest option. I know you haven't bought new clothes in 8 months. I know you're exhausted and alone, and one bad month away from complete financial collapse. Mina had stood up, pacing her small apartment, trying to control her panic. What do you want? I want to hire you. Translation work, same as you're already doing. But you'll take contracts at companies I specify. You'll translate documents for my legitimate businesses. And if you happen to notice anything unusual in those documents, anything illegal or suspicious, you'll report it to me. You want me to spy for you. I want you to do exactly what you're already doing. Translate documents and pay attention. The difference is I'll pay you 10 million won per month. Your father's debts will be cleared within 2 months. Your mother's medical expenses will be covered. Your brother's education will be secured. You'll finally be able to breathe. 10 million won per month. Mina had been making barely 3 million with all her freelance work combined. The offer was staggering, impossible, too good to be true. What's the catch? She'd asked. The catch is you'll be working for me, and I operate in spaces that aren't entirely legal. The companies I send you to investigate are usually involved in activities they shouldn't be. If you get caught gathering information, I can protect you to a point, but there's always risk. And if I say no, then we never speak again. Your father's debts remain yours. You keep struggling, and eventually, probably within a year, you'll collapse under the weight of it all. But it will be your choice. Mina had walked to her window, looking out at Seoul's lights. A city full of people who would never know her name, never care if she succeeded or failed. She'd been trying so hard to do things the right way. Work honest jobs, pay her debts, take care of her family. And she was drowning. I need to think about it, she'd said. You have 24 hours. After that, the offer expires. The line had gone dead. Mina hadn't slept that night. She'd paced her apartment, made lists of pros and cons, tried to figure out who this person was and how much danger she'd be in. She'd thought about her father, wondered what he would say, probably tell her to refuse, to find another way, to maintain her integrity. But her father was dead, and Mina was alive and responsible for people who depended on her. She'd called the number back 22 hours later. I'll do it, she'd said, but I have conditions. I won't participate in anything that directly hurts people. I won't translate documents related to drugs, human trafficking, or weapons. And I need to know your name. My name is Jae-hyun, and I agree to your conditions. I don't deal in those things anyway. I'm a businessman, Mina. I just operate in the gray areas where law and reality don't quite align. That had been 2 years ago. For 2 years, Mina had been working for Kang Jae-hyun. She took translation contracts at companies he specified. Always legitimate work, always real clients. But these companies were involved in activities Jae-hyun wanted information about. Money laundering, corporate fraud, bribery schemes. Mina translated documents, attended meetings, and reported anything unusual she noticed. She never met Jae-hyun in person. Everything was phone calls and encrypted messages. The money appeared in her account like clockwork, 10 million won every month. Her father's debts had been cleared within 6 weeks. Her mother's medical care was covered by a mysterious charity program that Mina suspected was anything but. Her brother's tuition was paid in full. For the first time in years, Mina could breathe. She moved to a better apartment in Mapogu, started eating real meals, bought new clothes, saved money. She told herself it was just business. She was a translator doing translation work. If her employer happened to use that information for criminal purposes, that wasn't really her responsibility. She kept her hands clean by maintaining very specific boundaries. She didn't translate anything related to violence, didn't participate in planning, just observed and reported. It was rationalization, and she knew it, but it was rationalization that let her sleep at night. The arrangement had worked perfectly for 2 years, until James Park had thrown her out of his office that morning, until she'd lost a contract that Jae-hyun had specifically set up so she could investigate Park Global Investments. Min-ah didn't know why Jae-hyun wanted information on James Park's company. She didn't ask. That was part of their arrangement. She gathered information. He used it however he saw fit. She maintained plausible deniability. But as she stood on that Gangnam sidewalk, checking her phone, and seeing 3 missed calls from Jae-hyun's number, she suspected her careful arrangement was about to change dramatically. She called him back. He answered immediately. "Are you safe?" His voice was tense, controlled. "I'm fine, just unemployed. I heard everything. I'm sorry that happened to you." Mina laughed, bitter. "Not your fault. James Park is just an asshole with an inferiority complex. I shouldn't have pushed back." "You absolutely should have. He had no right to speak to you that way." "He had every right. He was my client. I was his employee, and I forgot my place." Mina's voice was flat, emotionless, protective distance from feelings she couldn't afford to feel. "Your place?" Jae-hyun's voice sharpened. "Mina, your place is wherever you choose to put yourself, not wherever arrogant men decide to put you." Easy to say when you're not the one who just lost a major contract and probably got blacklisted in the industry. There was a pause. Then Jae-hyun said, very quietly, "Come meet me." Mina stopped walking. "What?" "It's time we met in person. I'm sending you an address. Be there in 1 hour." "Jae-hyun, we agreed. Plans change. The situation is more complicated than you know. James Park isn't just an arrogant CEO. He's involved in things that put you at risk. We need to talk, in person, please." The word please from a man who'd never asked for anything, only told her what he needed, made Mina pause. There was something in his voice she'd never heard before. Concern, maybe, or something deeper. 1 hour, she agreed. Send the address. The line went dead. 30 seconds later, an address appeared in her encrypted messages. Gangnam, expensive district, probably a penthouse knowing Jae-hyun's apparent wealth. Mina stood on the sidewalk and realized she was about to meet the man whose voice she'd known for 2 years, but whose face she'd never seen. The man who'd saved her family financially but remained a mystery. The man who operated in shadows and somehow made that seem normal. She was terrified and curious in equal measure. An hour later, Mina stood outside a luxury building in Cheongdam-dong, the kind of place where even the doormen wore designer suits. The kind of place she'd never belong. The doorman greeted her by name. "Miss Park, Mr. Kang is expecting you. 15th floor, the elevator code is 1573. Mina stepped into an elevator that required a security code. The ride up felt like ascending into another world. Each floor probably cost more than she'd make in a lifetime. The doors opened directly into a penthouse apartment. No hallway, no other doors. The elevator opened and you were just there, in someone's private space. The first thing Mina noticed was windows. Floor-to-ceiling windows showing all of Seoul spread out like a circuit board of lights and life. The second thing she noticed was the space itself. Minimalist, expensive, everything black and white and chrome. Modern art on the walls that probably cost more than her yearly salary. The third thing she noticed was the man standing by those windows. Kang Jae-hyun turned when the elevator opened, and Mina's breath caught. She didn't know what she'd expected. Someone older, maybe, scarred and brutal-looking. The stereotype of a criminal boss. Instead, Jae-hyun was young, probably mid-30s, with sharp features, and dark eyes that missed absolutely nothing. He wore all black, expensive suit, no tie, everything tailored perfectly. His dark hair was styled back from a face that belonged in business magazines, except for a thin scar along his jaw that hinted at violence in his past. He was handsome in a way that was almost unsettling. Too perfect, too controlled, like a blade disguised as art. Park Mina, he said her name like he'd been waiting years to say it out loud. Thank you for coming. Mina stepped out of the elevator, suddenly very aware of her modest business clothes and worn messenger bag. You didn't really give me a choice. You always have a choice. That's important to me that you understand that. Jae-hyun gestured to a seating area near the windows. Please, sit. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? Answers, Mina said, but she sat down because her legs felt shaky. 2 years of imagining this moment. And the reality was more intense than anything she'd pictured. You said James Park is involved in things that put me at risk. What things? Jae-hyun sat across from her, maintaining careful distance. Professional, despite the intimacy of meeting for the first time. Park Global Investments has been laundering money for a Yakuza operation, trying to expand into Seoul. Specifically, the Yamamoto family from Osaka. They're funneling money through James Park's company, using international investment deals as cover. Mina processed this information. And you knew this when you sent me there. I suspected. I needed confirmation. You were gathering evidence through the documents you translated. So I was bait. You were intelligence. There's a difference. Jae-hyun leaned forward slightly. Mina, you were never in physical danger at Park Global. The Yakuza didn't know you existed. You were just a translator as far as anyone was concerned. But now that James has fired you publicly, they might start asking questions. Why did he fire his translator so dramatically? What did she see? What does she know? I don't know anything. I translated investment documents. That's all. But they don't know that. And the Yakuza aren't known for their careful investigation methods. They eliminate potential problems first, ask questions later. Jae-hyun's voice was calm, stating facts. Which means, as of this morning, you went from being my invisible asset to being a visible target. Mina felt cold despite the warm apartment. So what do I do? You accept my protection, visible protection, not the background kind you've had for 2 years. Jae-hyun pulled out a folder from the table beside him. I've cleared your remaining obligations. Your father's debts are completely paid. Your mother's medical care is fully covered indefinitely. Your brother's education is secured through graduate school if he wants it. He slid the folder across to her. Mina opened it, saw payment confirmations, account statements, everything documented. You don't work for people like James Park anymore, Jae-hyun continued. You work exclusively for me now. Translation for my legitimate businesses, which are extensive. The pay is the same, 10 million won per month. But you'll also have security, full-time protection until the Yakuza situation is resolved. Min-ah looked up from the folder. You're saying I'm trapped. I can't leave, can't refuse, because now I'm a target. I'm saying I made you a target by sending you into that company, and I take responsibility for protecting you. Jae-hyun's eyes met hers directly. This isn't a trap, Mina. It's me doing what I should have done 2 years ago, making sure you're safe. 2 years ago, you kept your distance, professional boundaries. Now, suddenly you care about my safety? I've always cared about your safety. I've had people watching over you since day one. Jae-hyun paused, and for the first time since she arrived, his perfect control cracked slightly. I've been listening to your voice for 2 years. Heard you working late. Heard you call your mother every Sunday. Heard you being brilliant and no one acknowledging it. I told myself it was professional. You were a valuable asset. That's all. And now? Now someone humiliated you and threatened you, and I want to destroy him for it. That's not professional. That's personal. Jae-hyun stood, walked to the windows, his back to her. I don't do personal, Mina. In my world, personal feelings get people killed. But with you, I've been crossing that line for months and lying to myself about it. Mina stood too, processing this confession. You said I always have a choice. So what are my actual options here? Jae-hyun turned to face her. You can accept my protection, work for me exclusively, and let me handle the Yakuza situation. Or you can walk away, disappear maybe, leave Seoul, start over somewhere else. I'll still cover your family's needs. You'll still be safe financially, but you'll be on your own for physical safety. Those aren't really options. One is security, one is running for my life. I know. I'm sorry. And he looked genuinely sorry, which somehow made it worse. I involved you in dangerous work while keeping you at arm's length because it was easier for me that way. Safer for you, I thought. But this morning proved I was wrong. Distance doesn't protect you. Not anymore. Mina walked to the windows, stood beside him, looking out at Seoul, the city where she'd been born, struggled, survived. The city she loved despite everything. I'm not running, she said quietly. I'm tired of running. From debt, from fear, from life. If staying means accepting your protection, fine, but I have conditions. Name them. I'm not your possession, not your property. I work for you, but I'm not owned by you. Agreed? I want to know what's happening. No more keeping me in the dark about the dangers. If I'm a target, I deserve to know exactly what I'm up against. Agreed? And when this is over, when the Yakuza situation is resolved, we renegotiate. I decide if I keep working for you or move on. Jae-hyun was quiet for a moment. Then, agreed. Mina turned to look at him. They were standing close, closer than professional distance allowed. She could see the scar on his jaw more clearly now, the intensity in his dark eyes, the control he maintained over himself like armor. Why did you really want to meet in person? She asked. Jae-hyun held her gaze. Because for 2 years, you've been a voice on my phone, an asset in my files, someone I protected from a distance because that was safer for both of us. But this morning, when I heard you tell James Park that you weren't picking up those papers, that you weren't invisible anymore, he paused. I realized I'd been treating you like you were invisible too. Professional distance, keeping you at arm's length. It wasn't fair to you, and it wasn't honest about what you've become to me. What have I become to you? Someone I think about first thing in the morning and last thing at night. Someone whose safety matters more than strategic advantage. He stopped himself, stepping back, rebuilding that professional distance. Someone I need to protect, because I can't imagine this city without you in it. Mina's heart was racing. This was dangerous territory, more dangerous than any Yakuza threat. Jae-hyun, you don't have to say anything. I know this is complicated. I know I'm asking you to trust someone who operates in shadows. But I promise you this. I will keep you safe, no matter what it costs. And looking at him standing there in his expensive penthouse with his controlled power and his careful words, Mina believed him. She just wasn't sure if believing him was smart or the biggest mistake of her life. The next 3 days were the strangest of Mina's life. She didn't go back to her apartment in Mapo-gu. Jae-hyun insisted it wasn't safe, and he'd arranged a secured apartment in his building. Different floor, her own space, but close enough that his security could monitor her. Mina had protested at first, but when 2 men in dark suits arrived at her old apartment to collect her belongings, she realized arguing was pointless. Jae-hyun moved people and situations with the same efficiency most people ordered coffee. The secured apartment was on the 12th floor, 3 floors below Jae-hyun's penthouse. It was smaller than his space, but still nicer than anywhere Mina had ever lived. Modern furniture, full kitchen, windows overlooking Gangnam. The closet had clothes in her size, professional outfits, casual wear, everything she might need. Jae-hyun had thought of everything, which should have been comforting but felt slightly overwhelming. She was unpacking her books when her phone rang. Her mother's number. "Iama," Mina answered, forcing cheerfulness into her voice. "How are you feeling?" "Better, thanks to whatever miracle happened with my medical bills." Her mother's voice was warm but suspicious. "Mina, the hospital called. They said my entire balance was paid by a charitable foundation. Do you know anything about this?" Mina closed her eyes. She'd never told her mother about Jae-hyun, about the real source of the money that had saved their family. "It's a program for families of small business owners who died. Dad's printing company qualified. I applied months ago." The lie came easily now. She'd been telling versions of it for 2 years. "My daughter, always taking care of everything." Her mother's voice softened. "But who's taking care of you? You sound tired." "I'm fine, Iyama, just busy with work." "Work that makes you miss your father's memorial service last month." Guilt hit Mina like a physical blow. She had missed it. A translation deadline that couldn't be moved. Or so she'd told herself. Really, she'd been avoiding Busan, avoiding her mother's questions about her life in Seoul. Easier to stay distant, maintain the lies. "I'm sorry. I'll visit soon. I promise." "You better. Your brother asks about you constantly. He's worried, says you don't answer his messages." Because her brother was too observant, too smart. He'd noticed the expensive clothes, the sudden financial security, the vagueness about her work. He'd ask questions Mina couldn't answer honestly. They talked for a few more minutes before her mother had to go to a doctor's appointment. After hanging up, Mina sat on her new couch in her new apartment and felt the weight of all her carefully constructed lies pressing down. She'd told herself she was protecting her family by keeping them ignorant of her real life. But maybe she was just protecting herself from their judgment. A knock on the door startled her out of dark thoughts. Mina opened it to find Jae-hyun standing there in his usual black suit, holding 2 cups of coffee from an expensive cafe whose name she recognized but had never been able to afford. 3 sugars, extra cream, he said, offering her one. "I remember from a phone conversation 6 months ago. You were translating late and complained the office coffee tasted like burnt regret." Mina took the coffee, surprised he remembered such a minor detail. "You have a good memory. I pay attention to things that matter." Jae-hyun remained in the doorway, not presuming entry. "How are you settling in?" "It's nice. Much nicer than I deserve for being an asset who got compromised." "You're not an asset who got compromised. You're someone I put in danger by not being careful enough." Jae-hyun's voice was firm. "And this apartment isn't charity. It's me correcting a mistake." Mina gestured for him to come in, suddenly aware of how empty the space felt despite the furniture. No personal touches yet, no life, just a holding pattern. "Did you come here just to bring coffee, or is there news about James Park?" Jae-hyun walked to the window, maintaining his habit of claiming high ground with good views. "There's news. Park Global Investments is hemorrhaging money. 3 major investors pulled out yesterday. The Morrison Capital deal collapsed this morning. Someone leaked information about the company's financial irregularities to business media. James Park is scrambling." "Someone." Mina joined him at the window. "You mean you?" "I mean the truth has a way of emerging when the right pressure is applied." Jae-hyun sipped his coffee. James Park built his company on his father's reputation and creative accounting. Without investor confidence, the whole thing crumbles. By next week, he'll be facing audits, investigations, possible criminal charges. For money laundering. Among other things, fraud, tax evasion, bribery. The Yakuza connection just makes it more interesting for prosecutors. Jae-hyun looked at her. "How do you feel about that?" Mina considered the question honestly. She should feel guilty. Maybe. James Park was losing everything, and she'd been part of gathering the evidence that would destroy him. But when she thought about his face as he'd humiliated her, as he'd made her feel small and worthless, she felt something else entirely. "I feel like he earned it," she said quietly. "He hurt people. His employees, his investors, everyone who trusted him. I don't feel bad that he's facing consequences." "Good." Jae-hyun's approval was evident in his voice. "Conscience is valuable. Misplaced guilt isn't. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Minna realized she was getting used to his presence, the way he occupied space without dominating it. For someone with so much power, he was surprisingly calm, controlled in a way that suggested violence lurking underneath, but controlled nonetheless. "Can I ask you something?" Minna said. "Always." "Why did you become this? A criminal, I mean. You're clearly intelligent, educated, strategic. You could have done anything legitimate." Jae-hyun was quiet for so long Minna thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I was born into this. My father ran the Kang syndicate before me, his father before him. This life isn't something I chose. It's something I inherited." He turned to face her. "By the time I was old enough to understand I had options, I was already too deep. Too many people depending on me. Too many enemies who'd see leaving as weakness. Do you regret it?" "Every day. And never." He smiled slightly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I regret the violence, the moral compromises, the distance I have to maintain from normal life. But I don't regret the protection I can provide, the people I keep safe, the order I maintain in places where law can't reach." That sounds like rationalization. It is. Most of morality is rationalization when you look close enough. Jae-hyun set down his coffee cup. "I'm not a good man, Minna. I want you to understand that clearly. I do bad things for what I tell myself are good reasons. Sometimes I'm right. Sometimes I'm lying to myself. But I live by a code, and that code includes protecting people who matter to me. And I matter to you. More than I should let you." The admission was quiet, almost reluctant. "Which is why I need to tell you something else. The Yakuza situation is more serious than I initially suggested. They're not just concerned about what you might know. They're using James Park's mistake as an excuse to make a move into my territory." Minna felt her stomach drop. "Meaning?" "Meaning they're going to try to grab you. Use you as leverage against me. Force me to negotiate territory in exchange for your safety." Jae-hyun's voice remained calm, stating facts. "It's strategic. They lose nothing if they fail. You're just a translator, officially meaningless to me. But if they succeed, they gain significant advantage." "So I'm bait again?" "No, you're someone I'm going to protect." Jae-hyun pulled out his phone, showed her a photo. "This is Takeshi Yamamoto, lieutenant in the Yamamoto family Yakuza. He arrived in Seoul 2 days ago. My sources confirmed he's asking questions about you specifically. Your old address, your family, your schedule." The man in the photo looked professional, dangerous, like someone who hurt people as a job, not a passion. Minna looked away. "What do? We use their interest against them. Let them think you're accessible, vulnerable. Then we trap them." Jae-hyun's eyes met hers. "But it means you need to trust me completely. Trust that I'll keep you safe no matter what looks like it's happening. You're asking me to be bait after all. I'm asking you to be the trap. There's a difference." He reached out, almost touched her arm, then pulled back. "They expect a frightened translator. Someone alone, someone they can pressure or grab easily. We'll give them that appearance while surrounding you with protection they can't see." Minna understood the logic. She also understood the risk. And if something goes wrong? Nothing will go wrong. I've been planning operations like this since I was 20. I don't lose. Jae-hyun's confidence was absolute, almost arrogant. But looking at him, Minna believed him. "But if you don't want to do this, we find another way. Your safety is more important than strategy." It was the escape clause, offered genuinely. Minna could refuse. Let Jae-hyun handle this some other way. Stay hidden in her secure apartment while he dealt with the Yakuza through whatever violent means he preferred. But she'd spent 6 years being passive, being invisible, being the person things happened to rather than the person who made things happen. This morning in James Park's office, she'd found her voice. She wasn't ready to lose it again. "Tell me the plan," she said. Jae-hyun's expression shifted. Surprise. Respect. Something deeper he quickly controlled. "We start by making you visible. You go back to work tomorrow, public coffee shop in Gangnam doing translations. Normal routine. My people will be watching, but you'll look alone. Yamamoto's people will report your location, your vulnerability. They'll plan to approach you, probably within 48 hours. And then you'll record everything they say, every threat, every admission. We'll document the Yakuza's operation thoroughly enough that Korean authorities can't ignore it, and while they're focused on you, I'll be dismantling their actual operations in Seoul." Jae-hyun pulled up maps on his phone, showed her locations. They have 4 main fronts in the city: gambling operations in Gangnam, protection rackets in Itaewon, import operations at Incheon Port. While they chase you, I take their infrastructure. It was elegant, strategic. Use the enemy's focus against them. Min-ah had to admit it was smart. What if they decide to grab me immediately instead of threatening first? They won't. Kidnapping on Korean soil brings too much law enforcement attention. They'll try intimidation first. Threats against your family, offers of money to give up information, that kind of thing. Jae-hyun met her eyes. "You'll be wearing a wire, GPS tracker, panic button, and I'll be listening to every word. If anything feels wrong, you press the button and my people extract you immediately." You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's dangerous. But it's controlled danger, which is the only kind I allow. He hesitated, then added, "Minna, you don't have to do this. I can find another way." "No." Minna's voice was steady. "I'm tired of being protected from everything. Tired of being kept safe in the shadows. If I'm going to be part of your world, I want to actually be part of it, not just a voice you listen to from a distance." Something flickered in Jae-hyun's expression. Pain, maybe, or regret. Being part of my world isn't something to aspire to. Maybe not, but being invisible isn't working anymore either. Mina set down her coffee cup with finality. "When do we start?" The next morning, Min-ah sat in a Gangnam coffee shop with her laptop open, translating a perfectly legitimate contract for one of Jae-hyun's shipping companies. To anyone watching, she was just another freelancer working in public because her apartment was too isolating. She'd dressed carefully, professional, but not expensive. Approachable, vulnerable. The wire taped to her skin under her blouse felt foreign, intrusive. The GPS tracker in her bag's lining was invisible but heavy in her awareness. Jae-hyun's voice came through the nearly invisible earpiece periodically. "You're doing fine. Just stay natural." Natural. Mina wanted to laugh. There was nothing natural about bait yourself for Yakuza, while a crime lord whispered reassurance in your ear. She'd been there for 2 hours when a man sat down at her table without invitation. Korean, mid-30s, expensive casual clothes, friendly smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Excuse me, your Park Mina?" He spoke in Korean, his accent placing him from Busan. "The translator?" Mina looked up, manufactured surprise. "Yes? Do I know you?" "Not yet. My name is Choi Sung-ho. I work for some business associates who are very interested in your recent work at Park Global Investments." His smile widened. "We were hoping you might have time to discuss a potential contract." In her ear, Jae-hyun's voice was calm. "That's one of Yamamoto's local recruits, Korean national, no Yakuza tattoos, used for public contact. Stay calm, get him talking." Mina manufactured a professional smile. "I'm not currently taking new clients, but thank you for the interest. Perhaps you should hear our offer before declining. It's quite generous." Choi leaned forward slightly. "We understand you worked closely with Mr. Park's international investments. We're particularly interested in information about his Japanese business partners." There it was. Not even subtle. They wanted to know what she knew about James Park's connection to the Yamamoto family. "I'm sorry, but client confidentiality prevents me from discussing specific work." Mina kept her voice polite but firm. It's a professional ethics issue. Ethics? Choi's smile thinned. Of course. Very professional. Though I wonder if James Park shared your concern for ethics when he fired you so publicly. So they'd done their research, knew about the confrontation, probably had someone in Park Global feeding them information. Mr. Park and I had a professional disagreement, that's all. Mina started packing her laptop. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to finish at home. Choi's hand landed on her laptop, stopping her from closing it. Not aggressive, but insistent. Miss Park, I don't think you understand the situation. Our associates are very serious people. When they want information, they acquire it. The question is whether that acquisition is pleasant for everyone involved. Threat. Clear and direct. Min-ah felt her heart race but kept her expression steady. In her ear, "You're doing perfect. Get him to be more specific. We need clear threats on record." "Are you threatening me, Mr. Choi?" Mina asked quietly. "I'm explaining reality. You have information our associates need. You can provide it voluntarily and be compensated very generously. Or you can refuse, and we'll have to explore less pleasant methods of acquisition." His hand was still on her laptop. "You have family in Busan, don't you? Mother, younger brother. It would be unfortunate if your stubbornness caused them difficulty." There it was. Threat against her family, recorded clearly. Min-ah pulled her laptop away from his hand. "I'm going to leave now. Don't contact me again." She stood, packed her things, walked out of the coffee shop with her heart pounding. Behind her, Choi didn't follow. He'd delivered his message. The next move was hers. Outside, Min-ah walked 2 blocks before ducking into an alley where a black car was waiting. The door opened, and she slid inside. Jae-hyun was there, his expression dark with controlled anger. "You did perfectly," he said, removing the earpiece from her ear with surprising gentleness. "We have everything we need. Clear threats, admission they're investigating you, implied violence. Korean prosecutors will love it." Min-ah was shaking slightly, adrenaline fading into delayed fear. "He threatened my mother, my brother." "I know, and I've already tripled security in Busan. Your family is completely protected. Yamamoto's people can't get within 100 meters of them." Jae-hyun's hand covered hers briefly, warm and grounding. "You're safe. They're safe. This is almost over." "What happens now?" "Now we wait for their next move. They'll escalate, probably try to grab you within 24 hours. And when they do, we'll be ready." Jae-hyun's voice was cold, controlled, the voice of someone planning violence with clinical precision. The Yamamoto family is about to learn a very expensive lesson about operating in Seoul without permission. The car drove them back to the building in Gangnam. Mina went to her apartment, Jae-hyun to his penthouse. But that night, around 8 p.m., there was a knock on her door. Jae-hyun stood there holding containers of food from a restaurant Minya recognized as expensive and impossible to get reservations at. "I thought you might not have eaten, and I thought you might not want to be alone after today." It was thoughtful, unexpected. Minna let him in, and they ate at her small dining table. Korean food, perfectly prepared, tasting like comfort. They didn't talk about Yakuza, or threats or danger. Instead, they talked about translation, her favorite languages to work in, the strangest documents she'd ever encountered, the comedy of watching people try to use Google Translate for important business documents. Jae-hyun laughed, actually laughed, when she described a contract that had accidentally offered to deliver 10,000 angry chickens instead of 10,000 processed poultry. It was a real laugh, unguarded and genuine. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less like a crime lord, more like a person. "You love what you do," he observed. "I love languages. The work is just how I survive." Min-ah set down her chopsticks. "What do you love when you're not being the Viper of Gangnam?" Jae-hyun considered the question seriously. Architecture. I love looking at how buildings are designed, how spaces flow. I walk around Seoul sometimes, late at night, just studying structures, how they use light, create emotion through geometry. He looked almost embarrassed. It's pointless, just observation. It's not pointless, it's human. Mina smiled. You're allowed to be human, you know. Even crime lords get hobbies. Crime lords don't usually admit to their hobbies. Makes them seem less threatening. I think you're plenty threatening regardless of your architectural interests. They cleaned up together, an oddly domestic routine. As Jae-hyun was leaving, he paused at the door. Mina, about tomorrow, when they make their move, I need you to know something. What? If anything goes wrong, if any part of this plan fails, you are my priority. Not the strategy, not damaging the Yakuza, not even my territory. You. I want you to understand that clearly. Mina looked at him standing in her doorway, this dangerous man with his controlled power and careful words. Why? Because somewhere between listening to your voice for 2 years and watching you stand up to James Park and seeing you be brave today, somewhere in there, you stopped being an asset and became someone I can't imagine losing. Jae-hyun met her eyes directly. I don't say things like this. I don't let people matter this much. But you do? You matter, and I needed you to know that before tomorrow. Before Mina could respond, he left, closing the door quietly behind him. She stood in her apartment, heart racing for entirely different reasons than earlier. The wire was off, the GPS tracker in her bag, but she felt more exposed than she had all day. Because Jae-hyun had just admitted something neither of them could take back, and Mina realized she felt the same way. Somewhere between his voice in her ear and his coffee deliveries and his protection, and his carefully controlled confession, somewhere in there, she'd stopped thinking of him as her employer and started thinking of him as something much more complicated. Tomorrow, Yakuza would try to grab her. Tomorrow, Jae-hyun would spring his trap. Tomorrow, violence would happen. Plans would unfold. Danger would be very real. But tonight, Mina lay in bed and thought about a crime lord who loved architecture and a translator who'd stopped being invisible, and wondered what happened to people like them when the danger was over and only the feelings remained. She suspected they were about to find out.